For the last year, Rick Murphy, better known as Wrecker Rick, has used his social media platform to pay it forward. This weekend alone, rescuing over 30 people in hopes that they too pass it on to the next person.
Rick Murphy is the face people trust when everything goes wrong. To truck drivers across Arizona, he is Wrecker Rick, the man who pulls wrecked semis out of snow, ditches, and places no one else wants to touch. On the internet, he looks like a hero built for chaos, the kind of man who always finds a way through. But behind that image is a reality most viewers never see. Because the deeper Rick Murphy's legend grew, the closer danger moved toward his own family, his own body, and his own life. So what happens when the man known for saving everyone else can no longer outrun the cost himself? Murphy's Diesel began in 2014 in Kingman, Arizona. Rick Murphy and his wife Nikki started the company without outside investors, without a major bank cushion, and without a real safety net. What they had was mechanical skill, a willingness to work, and the belief that if they answered enough calls, the business would survive. Rick already knew diesel engines well, including the 7.3-liter Power Stroke, and that knowledge gave him a way into a crowded market. But only skill did not make the early years easy. In the beginning, their life was stripped down to the essentials. For almost 3 years, Rick and Nikki lived in a toy hauler trailer. It was not just a temporary inconvenience. It was the clearest sign of how much they were giving up to keep the business alive. Space was tight, privacy was limited. Comfort came last. Every extra dollar went back into Murphy's Diesel. Money that could have gone toward stability instead paid for tools, parts, fuel, rent, and anything else needed to keep jobs moving. That pressure shaped the way Rick worked. He could not afford to be selective. If a driver called late at night, he answered. If the job was dirty, time-consuming, or far outside town, he still took it. Kingman already had established repair shops, and a new company had to earn trust one customer at a time. Rick did that by staying available longer than everyone else. He built his name through repetition. One repair led to another. One roadside call led to another driver talking about Murphy's Diesel on the highway. But while the reputation grew, the financial side stayed fragile. Much of the work involved insurance claims, and payment often came long after the job was finished. Murphy's Diesel had to spend money first and wait later in some periods. Unpaid invoices climbed to around $500,000. That meant the company could complete major work, deliver results, and still sit for weeks or months without the money in hand. The bills, meanwhile, did not wait. Fuel had to be bought, equipment had to be repaired, parts had to be replaced. The business kept moving whether payment arrived or not. This created a dangerous habit early on. Rick learned to operate inside uncertainty instead of stepping back from it. He kept pushing through because slowing down could be just as dangerous as taking the next job. For a small company, that kind of delay could have ended everything. Instead of retreating, Rick leaned harder into the work. He began moving beyond routine diesel repair and toward heavy recovery, where the payouts could be bigger, but the stakes were much higher. That shift changed the company. It also changed the risks. Rick invested in a rebuilt 1969 Peterbilt that became the center of many future recoveries. He called it Hellboy. The truck gave Murphy's Diesel the power to take on jobs that smaller operators could not handle. It also brought higher costs, more maintenance, and more exposure. A heavy recovery truck is not just a tool. It is a constant expense. Insurance rises. Repairs never stop. Every gain in capability brings a new layer of pressure. At the same time, Rick was getting used to danger. Overturned semis, damaged loads, steep terrain, winter weather. and long nights on the roadside started to feel normal. That may have been necessary for survival, but it came at a price. When risk becomes routine, people stop treating it as a warning. They start treating it as part of the schedule. That is what happened here. Rest became secondary. Stability became something to think about later. The company moved forward by normalizing stress, fatigue, and uncertainty. Nikki carried her share of that pressure too. She was not standing outside the business, she was inside it. She handled logistics, calls, and paperwork while Rick worked in the field. That meant the company was not only their income, it took over their home life as well. Meals were interrupted, nights were interrupted, personal time was interrupted. In those early years, there was almost no clear line between business and family. Looking back, these years were more than a hard beginning. They were the foundation of everything that came later. Murphy's Diesel grew because Rick and Nikki accepted conditions that many people would have rejected. They gave up comfort, accepted constant uncertainty, and built the company through endurance. At the time, those choices looked temporary. They looked like the kind of sacrifice people make before life gets easier. But that is where the deeper tragedy began. The system that helped Rick Murphy succeed was the same system that taught him to live without margin. It taught him to treat danger as normal, exhaustion as manageable, and financial pressure as something to outrun rather than solve. Murphy's Diesel survived because Rick kept saying yes. Over time, that yes became the engine of the business. It also became the beginning of the trap. By 2017, Murphy's Diesel had moved beyond survival. The company was no longer a small roadside repair operation trying to stay open week to week. It had begun to expand. Rick Murphy slowly built the business into a larger recovery service. Over several years, Murphy's Diesel grew from one location in Kingman into 3 operating branches across Arizona. The work also changed. Instead of focusing mainly on diesel repair, the company increasingly handled heavy vehicle recovery. That meant responding to major accidents involving semi-trucks and large commercial vehicles. Interstate 40 runs directly through northern Arizona, and it carries constant long-distance freight traffic across the United States. When accidents happen on this highway, the consequences can be severe. A single overturned semi can block the entire road. Cargo can spill across lanes. Drivers can become trapped inside damaged vehicles. Local authorities sometimes needed heavy recovery companies to clear these scenes quickly. Murphy's Diesel began receiving those calls. Rick's equipment and experience allowed him to handle situations that smaller towing companies could not attempt. Recovering a loaded semi-truck requires careful planning. Crews must estimate the total weight of the truck and trailer. They must study the terrain, road angle, and the condition of the wrecked vehicle. Then they attach cables and winches in positions that allow the truck to be lifted or rotated without causing further collapse. A single mistake can cause a cable to snap or a truck to roll unexpectedly. That kind of work built Rick's reputation. At the same time, another force began pushing Murphy's Diesel into public attention. Rick started uploading videos of his recovery operations to YouTube. These videos showed real roadside recoveries from across Arizona. Some clips showed Hellboy pulling damaged semis out of deep roadside ditches. Others showed Rick rescuing drivers trapped in heavy snow along Interstate 40. The footage was direct and unscripted. Viewers saw trucks hanging at dangerous angles. They saw steel cables under tension. They saw Rick working in snow, mud, or darkness while traffic passed nearby. The channel slowly grew. Some recovery videos reached hundreds of thousands of views. Others crossed into the millions. Drivers across the country began recognizing Rick Murphy's name. Some truckers who broke down in Arizona specifically requested Murphy's Diesel when calling for help. That visibility brought advantages. The company gained national recognition. New customers appeared. Rick built a reputation as someone willing to attempt jobs that others avoided. But the online success came with another problem. YouTube income is unpredictable. The platform depends on algorithms, view counts, and advertising changes. One video might perform well while another receives little attention. That meant the channel could not provide stable financial security. Murphy's diesel still depended on the physical work. Meanwhile, the scale of that work continued increasing. Some recovery calls were unusually complex. In one case, a recreational vehicle fell roughly 50 feet down a steep slope near a roadway. Several towing companies refused the job before Murphy's diesel accepted it. Recovering the vehicle required careful planning, multiple cable points, and controlled lifting to prevent the RV from sliding further downhill. Operations like that could last for hours. Every move had to be calculated. The weight of the vehicle, the strength of the cable, and the angle of the terrain all had to align. If the cable snapped under tension, it could cause serious injury. If the vehicle shifted incorrectly, it could roll or collapse. Rick carried that responsibility every time he attached a cable. The pressure also followed him home. Nikki remained deeply involved in the business. She managed dispatch calls, scheduling, and administrative work when a driver called for help. Nikki often answered first. That meant the phone could ring at any moment. Family dinners could be interrupted by accident reports. Travel plans could change without warning. The company did not close at night. It stayed active as long as drivers were still on the road. As Murphy's diesel grew, the responsibilities multiplied. More employees meant more payroll. More equipment meant more maintenance costs. More contracts meant stricter expectations from clients and authorities who relied on the company to respond quickly. Success created new obligations instead of reducing pressure. At the same time, Rick's body carried the cost of constant recovery work. Many operations happened in freezing winter weather across northern Arizona. Some jobs lasted through entire nights. Recovery crews often stood in snow, mud, or strong wind while handling heavy steel cables and mechanical equipment. Physical exhaustion became common. Mental stress followed close behind. Dangerous recoveries do not end when the truck leaves the scene. The mind often replays every moment afterward. Workers think about the cable tension, the angles, and the risks they face. They ask whether anything could have gone wrong. Rick rarely spoke about that pressure directly, but in many of his videos, viewers could hear how much he respected the danger involved, even after years of experience. He still treated every major recovery with caution, yet he also kept accepting the next job. That pattern slowly revealed something deeper. Success did not reduce Rick's exposure to risk. It increased it. The more capable Murphy's diesel became, the more difficult calls arrived. Each new achievement raised expectations. Drivers and authorities began assuming that Rick would respond whenever the situation looked impossible. And Rick often did. In some videos, he admitted that the work had become addictive. The challenge, the responsibility, and the satisfaction of solving difficult recoveries pulled him back again and again. But addiction to work can hide exhaustion. Over time, the combination of constant danger, unpredictable income, and growing responsibility created a new kind of pressure. The company had succeeded. The reputation was real. Murphy's diesel had become known across the region. Yet every part of that success depended on Rick Murphy continuing to step into situations where one mistake could change everything. The risks were no longer theoretical. They were waiting on the next highway call. By this stage, the danger around Rick Murphy was no longer just part of the job. It had become personal. What had once looked like calculated risk now started hitting the people closest to him. And when that happens, more than once, the story changes. One of the clearest breaking points came in February 2024. In a video later posted to the Murphy's Diesel channel under the title, "My Family Almost Died. Scariest phone call I've ever had." Rick described a pileup involving his own family on Interstate 40. The video centers on a panicked call from Nikki as conditions turned chaotic on the highway. The title itself framed it as the scariest phone call he had ever received. And the story was not about a customer or a stranger. It was about his wife and child being trapped inside the kind of event he usually responds to as the rescuer. According to the account Rick shared, Nikki had Indy with her when traffic conditions suddenly collapsed around them. They had to swerve to avoid a jackknifed truck and ended up in the ditch. For Rick, the deepest shock was not only the danger itself, it was helplessness. He was used to taking control, sending equipment, and solving a problem with his own hands. At that moment, he could do none of that. He feared his family had been caught inside a massive highway wreck, and he later described the call as the kind of nightmare every man in his position dreads most. The family survived, but the fact that they survived did not erase the emotional damage. It proved something Rick had spent years trying to outrun. The people who rescue others are not protected from disaster themselves. That event mattered because it changed the meaning of risk. Until then, danger had been tied mostly to the work. A cable could fail, a truck could shift, a job could go bad. After the Interstate 40 incident, the threat was no longer confined to recovery scenes. It had crossed into family life. It had reached Nikki. It had reached one of his daughters. That kind of moment stays with a person because it attacks the one thing work is supposed to protect. Then came another kind of reminder. In 2025, Rick's old truck projects and long family road trips showed just how thin the line between confidence and crisis could be. On the Murphy's Diesel channel, Rick posted a video about a 1981 Kenworth cabover that had been sitting dead for more than 6 years. In the video description, he explained that he was determined to get the truck running and drive it 400 miles home. Another video in the same sequence followed the drive itself and asked a simple question in the title: what can go wrong? That question was not just for drama. It reflected the reality of what happens when old diesel equipment fails far from help. That vulnerability had already appeared in other road trip breakdowns. In one recent Murphy's Diesel video, Rick described stranding his family 800 miles away after a long recovery trip in Nebraska. The video summary says he and the family finished a demanding job, headed toward Denver for a break, and then found themselves relying on Facebook Marketplace to solve the problem after their vehicle troubles left them stuck. Another channel video describes Rick and Nikki breaking down on the side of the highway while traveling with a welding rig and a 47-foot toy hauler on a trip to Tennessee. These episodes may not look as dramatic as a rollover recovery on a mountain road, but they expose the same deeper truth. The man who makes a living solving roadside emergencies is still one mechanical failure away from becoming the stranded driver himself. That matters because mechanical control is part of Rick's identity. He is the man people watch rebuilding trucks, diagnosing failures, and driving old equipment across long distances. But a breakdown in the wrong place strips away that image fast. It reminds him that skill lowers risk, but it does not erase it. It also puts the family inside the uncertainty. A snapped belt, a cooling failure, or a steering problem is no longer just an inconvenience when your wife and children are riding with you. Then came the storm that pushed everything even further. In early March 2025, northern Arizona was hit by a winter storm that dropped more than 2 feet of snow in parts of the high country. Interstate 40 shut down, and roads near Ash Fork and Williams became dangerous enough to trap large numbers of drivers. Fox 10 Phoenix reported on March 11, 2025, that Rick Murphy spent 40 straight hours helping stranded motorists and rescued 30 drivers during that storm. Rick told the station that the storm came out of nowhere for them. He also described a practical fear that many stranded people faced immediately: if they called for a normal recovery. The cost could be astronomical, That detail is important because it explains why Rick's role became so emotionally loaded. Fox 10 reported that he had used his platform to pay it forward, and that many of the people he pulled out were not charged at all when people insisted on paying. Rick said he often used that money to help the next person. The report also noted that Murphy's diesel is contracted by law enforcement to clear major highways. While much of the back road help Rick gave during the storm came simply from his own decision to go out there. In his own words, helping others had become his real passion, and the work itself was addictive. But passion does not cancel exhaustion. 40 straight hours in snow, ice, and freezing wind is not just hard work. It is physical punishment. Fox 10 described blizzard-like conditions, stranded drivers, and long lines of traffic between Ash Fork and Williams. Rick said the flow of vehicles was so heavy that more groups kept arriving while his crew was still trying to recover the cars already stuck. That kind of situation turns one rescue into 10, then 20, then 30. At that point, the work is no longer just a job. It becomes a test of how long a person can keep functioning under strain. And even that was not the end of the pattern. On the Murphy's Diesel channel, later episodes continued showing how recovery work and travel could turn unstable without warning. One recent episode describes Rick getting stranded on a cliff overnight during an off-road rescue. Another recent video centers on a family trip after a Nebraska recovery job that turns into another roadside problem in Colorado. These cases did not become national tragedies. No one died. But that is exactly why they matter. They show how pressure accumulates through repeated near misses, mechanical failures, and constant exposure to danger. A single event can be dismissed as bad luck. A long chain of them starts to look like a way of life. That is the real breaking point in Rick Murphy's story. It was not one accident, it was not one breakdown, it was not one storm, it was the pattern. The Interstate 40 pileup made the fear personal. The repeated vehicle failures exposed how fragile control really is. The March 2025 snowstorm showed how his public image as a rescuer now demanded physical sacrifice on an extreme level. And the off-road incidents kept proving that even experience, strong equipment, and good instincts cannot remove danger from a life built around dangerous work. By then, Rick Murphy was no longer just a man taking hard jobs. He had become someone living inside a cycle where every success brought more expectation, every rescue brought more exposure, and every close call left another mark. That is when the tragedy stops feeling abstract. That is when the rescuer realizes he is not immune. By this point, Rick Murphy was no longer just running a diesel and recovery business. He had become the person people called when the situation was already serious. That role carries status, but it also carries emotional weight. When a highway is blocked, when a family is stranded in deep snow, or when a truck is hanging in a place no one else wants to touch, the expectation becomes simple. Rick will answer. Rick will come. Rick will figure it out. That expectation is powerful because it creates a moral burden. Once a man builds a reputation for showing up in the worst moments, saying no starts to feel like abandoning people. Over time, this becomes its own kind of pressure. The decision is no longer only about business. It becomes emotional. It becomes personal. Rick is not just weighing fuel, labor, and equipment. He is also weighing guilt. If he does not take the call, someone else may stay stranded longer, lose more money, or face greater danger. That pressure grew even stronger because of his public image. His YouTube channel did not only show recoveries, it showed a pattern of service. Viewers watched him rescue stranded drivers during snowstorms, recover vehicles others had refused, and help families in situations where the outcome felt uncertain. Stories like the March 2025 storm, where Fox 10 Phoenix reported that Rick rescued 30 drivers over 40 hours and often refused payment. reinforced the idea that he was not simply a contractor. He was the man who helped because helping had become part of who he was. That image inspires admiration, but it also creates expectation. Once people see you giving free help in moments of crisis, some begin to assume that help will always be there. That expectation does not stay outside the home. It follows the family. Nikki is not separate from the pressure. She helps manage the business, handles calls, and lives with the constant uncertainty of Rick going into dangerous situations. Every serious call affects her too. Every winter storm, every overnight recovery, and every report of a wreck on Interstate 40 carries an extra layer of fear because she knows exactly what the work can do. The February 2024 pileup involving Nikki and Indy made that even more painful. After that moment, the danger was no longer theoretical or limited to Rick's job sites. It had already reached his own family. Then there is the physical cost. Recovery work does not only wear down equipment, it wears down the body. Long hours in snow, mud, cold wind, and dangerous terrain create a steady form of exhaustion that does not disappear with one good night's sleep. Heavy cables, winches, roadside repairs, and repeated travel all leave a mark. A man can keep moving through that for years, especially if he believes people depend on him, but the cost still accumulates. Muscles stay tight, joints stay sore, sleep becomes lighter, rest turns into recovery, and recovery never feels complete. The mental strain can be even harder to measure. Dangerous jobs do not always end when the scene is cleared. The mind often keeps replaying the moments afterward. It replays the angle of the wreck, the tension in the cable, the possibility of equipment failure, and the split second when something could have gone wrong. The more serious the work becomes, the harder it is to fully switch off. Rick himself has described the work as addictive, especially when talking about helping people and responding to major incidents. That word matters. Addiction does not always look like pleasure. Sometimes it looks like compulsion. It looks like a person who cannot stop because stopping would mean facing everything the work has already taken out of him. This is where success turns into a trap. From the outside, Murphy's Diesel looks like a growth story. The company expanded from 1 location to 3. Rick built a strong brand, gained national recognition online, and became known for jobs that other operators refused. But growth did not give him freedom. In many ways, it reduced it. A bigger company means more employees, more payroll, more maintenance, more contracts, and more people depending on the next job being completed. A stronger reputation means more calls, not fewer. The more successful Rick became, the harder it likely became to step away. That is the hidden side of public respect. When enough people rely on you, commitment starts to harden into permanent obligation. Retirement becomes harder to imagine. Real time off becomes harder to take. Even family trips can turn into breakdown stories, emergency repairs, or yet another reminder that the life he built never fully powers down. On the Murphy's Diesel channel, even personal travel and family time have repeatedly become stories about mechanical failure, roadside stress, or another unexpected test. Those incidents matter because they show that the pressure is no longer confined to the workday. It travels with him. That is why the tragedy here does not look like one catastrophic loss. It looks smaller than that on paper, but deeper in daily life. It looks like a family trip turning into a roadside problem. It looks like a father answering another emergency after too little sleep. It looks like Nikki carrying the strain of dispatch, business management, and fear every time Rick goes out on another dangerous call. It looks like a man praised as a hero while privately carrying exhaustion that never fully leaves. In one sense, that makes the story even more unsettling. A single disaster is easier to name. This kind of damage is harder to explain because it builds slowly. It hides inside repetition. It hides inside competence. It hides inside a man who still gets the job done. And that leads to the moral question at the center of Rick Murphy's story. What does it cost to spend your life rescuing other people if the role slowly consumes your own margin for safety, rest, and peace? That question does not erase what Rick has done. If anything, it makes those actions more meaningful. It shows that many of the strongest public images are built on private sacrifice. The same qualities that make a man dependable in crisis can also make him vulnerable to carrying too much for too long. Rick Murphy became known as the man who could pull others out of danger. The long-term consequence is that his own life began to revolve around permanent readiness, repeated strain, and a level of responsibility that is hard to put down. That is the trap of success. The world sees the capability. The family feels the cost, reflection, and hope. Rick Murphy's story is tragic, but not in the usual way. It is not the story of one sudden collapse. It is the story of pressure building over years through sacrifice, risk, financial strain, and repeated close calls. The early years in a trailer, the unpaid invoices, the expansion of Murphy's Diesel, the dangerous recoveries, the family pileup on Interstate 40, the breakdowns far from home, and the 40-hour snowstorm rescue in March 2025 all point in the same direction. The danger did not arrive all at once. It accumulated. That is what makes the story worth examining. It reveals the hidden cost of high-risk work when it is mixed with public admiration and constant responsibility. Most people see the recovery truck, the successful pull, the blocked highway reopened, or the stranded family brought back to safety. They do not always see the unpaid stress afterward, the fatigue carried home, or the emotional damage left by one phone call that nearly ends in disaster. Stories like the one Fox 10 Phoenix reported in March 2025 matter because they pull attention toward that human side. They show that behind the strong image is a person absorbing the cost one incident at a time. Even so, Rick's story is not only about warning, it also leaves room for hope. He is still working. He is still helping people. He is still the man many drivers think of when everything goes wrong. That means the future is not closed. The deeper hope in this story is not that Rick will stop being who he is. It is that the same man who pulls others back to safety can also protect some space for his own life, his own health, and his own family.